privatization. You open an industry to more competition by removing government regulation. So some governments, particularly on the left, will say, no, you can't privatize. Everybody, like everything is owned publicly, right? So right now the gym is kind of public use, right? During school hours, everybody shares it, but after school, people can pay to rent it out, and then they compete, perhaps, or whatever they do. I don't think anyone really competes to pay to get into the gym, but government regulations might look like the reduction or elimination of government power in a particular industry. So we talked in the grade 9 class. In Canada, can you buy raw milk?
No. Raw milk.
Raw milk. Milk.
Milk.
Okay.
Milk.
Can you buy it? Yes or no?
No.
Can you just go to a farmer and say, hey, I want to buy? What happens? They'll say no, likely. What would happen to the farmer if they got caught? They might lose their ability to sell milk, right? Okay. So the government in Canada has quite a bit of power over the dairy industry, right? Like even consumers, we can't just make our own choice and say, hey, I'm just gonna go buy raw milk. I'm gonna go find somebody who has a cow and does this themselves, I'm gonna buy that. You're making a weird look, but it's actually good for you. Right? It's very, very beneficial. Okay. Removal or reduction of laws or other demands of government control as well as another way. So maybe there's a law, like there are laws, like dairy farmers can't just sell their milk privately. They have to sell it to government industry, right? And that's controlled. Same with wheat as well, wheat. Okay. Stuff you make bread out of. Right, farmers as well, they can't sell it to just anyone. They have to grow a certain amount and then they give it to the Canadian Wheat Board, right? They dictate the prices, right? So that's not necessarily a privatized industry. It's very much government controlled and regulated, right? One of the aspects of privatizing industry is to remove government limitations on that industry. So ideally in countries that are trying to develop, you want less roadblocks to developing that industry. Right, so you privatize it. You say, okay, we're gonna deregulate it. There's gonna be less rules and laws and regulations that prevent you from doing things. We're gonna open it up to private people. Go ahead, I already know you wanna go to the wash. Okay. Privatization is also the sale of government-owned industries and services to private businesses. You kids remember crown corporations? What are crown corporations? It's owned by the government, and particularly in Canada, that's what we call them, crown corporations. What type of things do crown corporations offer? What's that? Okay. What might, like, do you remember any examples that we learned in grade 9?
Like the Canadian Airlines.
Canadian Airlines, right? So the Canadian government has a company with airlines, or did at some point. I don't know if Air Canada is still a crown corporation. They offer a service. People need to travel across Canada. It's one of the biggest countries in the world. It's very hard to get around, right? So that's an essential service. What other essentials? So that's basically what crown corporations offer, essential services, right? What are some things that are essential to living in North America or Alberta? Water, right? Okay. So jacket keeps your body warm. What keeps your house warm? Right. Oil and gas, right? So those services are necessities, right? And in Alberta and Canada, they have less privatization, right? What else might be essential? There's one more main thing. Healthcare, right? I always forget about that one, right? In Canada, is healthcare public or private? Public, right? Everyone can use it, everyone pays into it. In America, is it more public or private? Private. It's a little bit more private, right? You have to have your own insurance set up, you gotta find your own doctors and whatnot, right? Not everyone can necessarily access it the same way. And if you have a lot of money, you can just access the best resources, the best services at your own time, right? It costs a lot. Okay. So part of privatization might be removing laws. Another part might be selling off businesses that are owned by the government. Okay. What else? Once there's less or no influence from the government in a particular industry, private individuals and companies can enter into the market freely and compete to provide the best service to customers, right? So if there's no privatization, then individuals, companies have to pick up that slack and they have to compete to offer a service, right? So ideally, in a more privatized economy, as a consumer, as someone making those choices, you decide for yourself, like, do I want ATCO or do I want EPCOR, right? Whatever you decide, right? Like your families will make a decision on which internet service provider you pick as well, right? So you have a couple different options, right? And I don't know if there's like a government one for that, right? But even then, there's not a whole lot of competition with internet services or cell phone, right? We already talked about the cell phones. What are the three main cell phone companies in Alberta and Canada? Sorry, cell phone service.
Oh, like Rogers.
Rogers, TELUS, Bell, Shaw would be another one, right? But I don't think Shaw necessarily does a lot for cell phones. They do a lot for internet though, right? But we have three main companies for cell phone service, right? Still gotta get some of this. Why privatize? Some of my thoughts. Sometimes if you have the government just running a particular industry, you know, it can slow down. You can create a lot of regulation and red tape. So for example, for those of you who play sports for the school, if you drive yourself, is that allowed? Can you drive yourself to a game?
Yeah.
Right? You can drive yourself to a game. What happens if are you allowed to bring one of your buddies on the team into your car and drive them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're not. It's not allowed, right? You can't do that. No.
School.
What's that?
Outside school, maybe.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want on the weekend, right? But if you're driving for a school event, you're not allowed to bring someone else into your car, right? Like athletes, what's up?
Is it just for sports or anything?
I mean, it's very regulated for sports. Like they don't want athletes doing that, but I would assume it's for everything.
It's like you went out at break.
What's up?
Out to break with friends. When their car, that's considered wrong.
Well, that's a bit different, right? You're on your own time, right? So I mean, like if you were to, let's say there's a game at 6 o'clock at another school and 4 of you get into that car on the team, right? They're not allowed to do that, right? There's the school board has rules against that, right? And then there's consequences. I don't know what they are, but
Driving to and away from the game or just to?
yeah. So another rule is if you come to the game on the bus with the team, you can't leave with someone else, right? Like you have to go back the same way you came, unless it's your parent, guardian, right? What's up? What's up?
Great. So you know how like we go to a hotel, right? What if I drove myself to that hotel?
Yeah, you can drive yourself, but you're not allowed to bring other people, right?
Am I allowed to like play in the tournament as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just talking about the difference between like having privatization and having regulation, right? So we have rules that prevent athletes from driving one another, right? So actually when I went to the comps practice, I asked them, I said, what do you pay for in your fees? So their athletes are responsible for driving themselves, right? So they don't pay a busing fee. That opens up all these dollars that allows them to get a full jumpsuit, like a tracksuit, practice jersey, and an extra t-shirt, right? And they're responsible for their own hotels, right? So those decisions of when a company or a country decides to keep something public or private makes an impact on consumer choices, right? So with Christ the King, we bus students, right? And we pay for your hotel. That goes into your fee, which means that you don't get like a practice reversible that you get to keep. You don't get any team swag, right? Unless we make the fee $500-600, right? Which no one wants, right?
So could a coach take more than like 4 people to a place?
Yeah, but then there's laws and regulations on the coaches and teachers. Like you need proper insurance. You need $2 million liability,
Basically, you take me.
I'm actually gonna look into my insurance stuff and see how much it costs to change that.
I think Balaka has one.
Yeah, Mr. Hogan, I think, has
Yeah, Mr.
the 2
Hogan.
million, that's why he's able to drop students off, right? Right. So again, you know, when you're privatizing, you're saying, hey, you know what? You wanna make that choice, you make that choice. If there's a consequence, you suffer that consequence, right? But school boards are very opposite, right? They're looking for all the ways to protect themselves from getting sued. Right? That's why did you kids ever do gymnastics when you were in school, like kindergarten, right?
No.
Yeah.
Some of you did.
Like school gymnastics or like?
Yeah, gymnastics with the school.
No.
Yeah?
That was an option.
Did you go somewhere to do it? You did it at the school, right? So why do you think they stopped doing that?
Injuries.
Injuries, right? Like when I was in university, they talked about a couple of specific cases, but there was one. This school was doing gymnastics in their gym, as they always had done. Some kid broke his neck doing something that he wasn't supposed to be doing. He's paralyzed, but he sued the school board, and they won the case. I think the family, right? Despite the fact that, you know, the teacher had properly instructed, the pupil was the one doing something wrong and was like screwing around somewhere they shouldn't be. But school boards, you know, it's an organization, it's not that different like the government. They're gonna figure out ways to protect themselves, right? And it makes sense, right? So they don't wanna get sued, so it's like, all right, no gymnastics, right? I'm pretty sure that's why a lot of wrestling programs got canceled as well. I'm pretty sure the liability is why we don't have a football team, aside from the fact